Good evening. The opinions and statements voiced by our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of this network. Enjoy the shows.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, historic films made in the spring of 1948 and just released show Eniwetok preparing for heavily guarded and still largely secret tests of new atomic weapons. The test's purpose is to measure atomic effects on thousands of different materials, 30,000 tons of them, not, as at Bikini, to prove military effectiveness.
San Francisco police say that 9 persons have been arrested in a narcotics raid on the headquarters of the Grateful Dead, a widely popular singing group. 2 members of the group, Rod McKernan and Robert Weir, and their business manager, Danny Rifkin, have been booked on suspicion of possessing narcotics.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
Here we got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting their roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, strange lights are causing a viral buzz on YouTube. Could we have caught extraterrestrial activity on a recent newscast? Brandon Arroyo investigates.
As the newscast ended, the controversy began back on September 26th. What is that light shining in the back of the dark night sky?
With coverage reaching all the way back to 1948, for over 70 years, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Now, Fate Magazine Radio is carrying on that tradition of setting the standard in paranormal talk radio as we report and discuss some of the most mysterious and perplexing phenomena imaginable in this strange world of ours. Now, here is your host of Fate Magazine Radio, Kat Hobson.
Welcome to Fate Mag Radio here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I am Kat Hobson. I am your host. Friends sometimes call me the voice of Fate, and I am fine with that. I am the online voice of Fate Magazine, which honors me greatly because that is a brilliant magazine with an amazing history. I am so excited about tonight's show. I do not always do a lot of cryptid stuff. Bigfoot, I know a little about Bigfoot. I know a little about, yes, I know enough to be dangerous, as they say down here sometimes. But it fascinates me because I have seen things that made me go, ooh, how did that survive in this environment? And people like Scott Mardis, our guest tonight, can help answer those questions. He also has been researching the Lake Champlain monster, Champ, for almost 35 years. I think he may be at 35 years. But he has done a lot of work. He has been honored by so many different institutions. He has written so many papers, a lot of which I had to get a dictionary to understand some of the words. Scott, you're very technical, and I love that. But my friend Scott Mardis is who is joining us tonight. So thank you for being here, Scott.
Well, thank you for having me on, Kat. There's a lot we can talk about. I'm sure we won't be able to get to all of it, but, I lived in New England for 18 years.
I do know that.
Yeah, and now I'm living in South Florida, about 50 miles south of Tampa. My roots in New England are very deep. They run all the way to Gadsden, Alabama.
Yes, they do. Hometown boy
The very
almost.
the deepest southern part of Vermont that you could go. A southern fried Yankee.
No doubt.
Yep. So,
But you don't sound that much like me. They must have drummed it out of you a little bit.
I don't know. I mean, I've got relatives that, they talk, their accent is so thick you could cut it with a knife,
Oh, yeah.
So, I don't know. I just, I lived in the Northeast up, above the Mason-Dixon line for 25 years. So that probably had something to do with it.
Could have.
However,
there's a possibility.
I grew up eating grits and fried chicken livers and all that stuff,
Fish
You
bake.
go up north, it's soul food because mostly black people eat it, but you go down south and everybody eats it.
That's true.
Yeah,
I found that to be the case in when I went to New York. My daughter was living there, and I went up, and I, of course, had the hours that she was working to myself to wander the city. And I found some of the best Southern cooking. It shocked me. And then I found some that the tea was like syrup, so they were from Texas.
Sweet tea, too sweet, huh? Yeah, you
Yes.
got to get it just right.
You do, because, man, you don't want it sticking to your teeth, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So you had all those years up there as a displaced Southerner.
Yep. And I'm going back next weekend
I
for
know.
a month.
I wasn't sure you were going to get to go. I knew that your trip got put off, which is why I grabbed you when I could.
The virus did its very best to throw a monkey wrench in my plans, but I did an end run around it. So, knock on wood, I'll be on a plane this Saturday, and we'll land in Burlington, Vermont at 10:15 p.m. And then I'm off to the plesiosaur races.
No doubt. I was really interested because, I have read your papers over the years. We've known each other online for quite some time. We've interviewed together. When I first became aware of the plesiosaurs, because, I'm not a marine mammal girl except for dolphins and the occasional whale and snapper. I love snapper. But anyway, I digress. But the whole idea of there actually being an historic creature that matched all of this information blew my mind. Because I was talking with Max about a project that he has going on, Max Hawthorne, and everybody knows Cronus with his new book coming out.
He's my buddy. I talk to him every day almost.
He is a wonderful man. I like him a lot.
Yep. Smart guy.
Between the two of y'all, there's a lot more. Kevin and Jennifer who first drew me kicking and screaming over the mantle there.
Yeah.
But
I sure do miss Kevin.
Yeah, me too.
I think we all do. And you knew Jeff Stentz too, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I miss Jeff too. That's tragic.
There's so much loss, and so much.
Yeah.
These people dedicated their lives to their work.
Yeah.
And it does my heart good every time I see Jennifer, because I am a spur of the moment call you person. I don't always, keep in touch as well as I should do that. But these were the people who, for the last almost 6 years have been the voice in my head educating me, or in my ears, educating me about cryptids, about, I already knew a good bit about conspiracy theory because I love politics. I was a political science student, and it fascinates me, so I enjoy that. But there's so much out there that I didn't even know was real until I met them and started learning from them. Brilliant teachers, both of them. So, and you, and Max, and oh my gosh, so many people.
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't realize there's quite a bit of Bigfoot activity, historical, going back a long way in parts of Alabama. Like, there was a whole series of famous incidents that happened in the 1950s in a little place called Clanton, which is near Selma. I've been down there before. And have you ever heard of the story of the Alabama white thing?
Yes, I have.
My grandfather and uncle claimed to have seen it before I was born.
Know that. Why haven't you ever told me that?
Absolutely. Well, it just doesn't come up in my conversation very much. but my grandfather, my grandfather, who grew up in a little place called Huelaco, which is kind of south of Arab. It's like between Arab and Coleman.
Okay, I'm with you. I know where that is.
And it's somewhere, I guess you'd say, south of Decatur. So if you went south from Decatur and we're going down, I think it's Highway 67, maybe, and you're passing through between Coleman and Arab, you pass right through it. It's just a little hole in the road. The only thing that had to mark it was a general store that was there for, I don't know, 60 years, and then finally closed down. It really is just like a whistle stop. Anyway, my grandfather and his, I guess there were 10 kids all together, and my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother all lived, out in the country, in this house with no electricity, out in the boonies. My great-grandmother killed a rattlesnake with a hoe one time that was like, 7, 8 feet long.
Oh,
and I remember this. This was like when I was 3 or 4 years old. I was there and saw the snake, So they lived way out in the country. Well, anyway, people out in Huelaco kept seeing this mysterious animal, big white animal. They would see it at night, and they called it the white thing. And my grandfather and his younger brother claimed to have seen it. My grandfather used to tell me stories about it, bedtime stories, because I always liked monster stories, so, But they seriously claimed to have seen this. And it blew my mind. One day I was just messing around on Facebook, and there's a Facebook group dedicated to the Alabama white thing, and it blew my mind. I was like, wow, My grandfather used to tell me stories about this thing,
Yeah.
And I had no idea it was still going on. And then years later, I was reading Ivan Sanderson's book on Bigfoot, this book called Abominable Snowman, Legend Come to Life. It was written in 1961. And, it's like a 500 or 600 page book. Very scholarly book on all the reports of unknown hominoids all over the planet. And then there's this one little line that says about, there were sightings in Clanton, Alabama in 1958. And it's like, what? So, there's Bigfoot stuff going on in Alabama.
Yeah. Well, we've got a guy here now, Jonathan Odom, who I greatly admire. I think he is one of the most ethical people I know. He is Alabama Bigfoot and Paranormal. And it is just fascinating. He has some video that blows me away. I have been so interested. He has video of him walking out of the woods right? And he's just like filming, panning over his shoulder, saying, bye, here I go. And, you know, when he got home and posted the video, another woman reviewing that said, you know that there's a juvenile in this video. As you're walking away, it gets up from beside, and I saw it. I didn't know exactly what it was, but it got up from where it had been squatting or leaning against a tree and just turned around and walked off. And he had no idea it was there. He was just, you know, he was out by himself. He was coming out of the woods, just you know. And I am so not that person that's going to be in there by myself. So.
Well, I've got a friend that lives in Birmingham that does Bigfoot research in Alabama. You may have heard of him. Alex Bobulinski.
Oh, I do know Alex Bob. In fact, I used one of the bios from one of his cons you attended because it had more of the technical stuff than I was even aware of. And I've researched you greatly. But Alex Bob
he filmed my lecture at the Creature Weekend in 2017. He filmed it.
Yes.
And put it on YouTube.
Yes, he did. He's great about that. And
I
know that he had kind of pulled away for a couple of months, and I didn't want to infringe on, you know, their privacy. So I just shot him a message and said, I'm interviewing Scott, and I took this, and I hope you're okay with that. Let me know if you're not, kind of a thing. So
his wife's been ill.
Yes.
She had surgery, and I think she's still recovering from it, so I'm sure he'll be back at some point.
Oh, I'm sure, too, because they both love it. She just
has to heal. And I wish them the best. I've met both of them. I met them both at the Creature Weekend. That's where we met about 3 years ago. And,
they're great people.
I've been on his show, I think, like 4 times, something like that. Yeah, on his podcast. So.
And he is a great Bigfoot person.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love his photography of what he does, and he lectured at the I think we were at the same place presenting.
Well, he does a lot of parapsychology stuff too, ghost hunting.
Yeah, he does. That's how I first met them. Was they were at one of my old team's events investigating a library down in Sylacauga. So they are just good people.
Well, one thing that we talked about on his show was old reports of monsters on the Coosa River from like the, I don't know, 1880s, 1890s.
Yes.
And
I found some of those.
Yeah. And there's always been giant catfish stories around the Gunnersville Dam. And sometime back in the late 60s or 70s, the Wheeler Wildlife Refuge, which is over near the Tennessee River around Decatur, I believe, stocked alligators because they thought that alligators had been native to North Alabama and had been extirpated. So it was kind of like the idea of the restocking wolves and bears and mountain lions, you know, and then later on they found out that the alligators weren't native to this part of Alabama, that far north, but they're still there. And occasionally one will get into the Tennessee River.
Oh, I bet.
Right there where you go across the bridge going into Huntsville, you know, where the river is. Yeah. So, yeah, they would be right at home there, you know, and I'm sure they could survive Alabama winters. I mean, they survived the ones in Virginia. That's about the end of their range, their northern range. And the winters get pretty, you know, cold in Virginia, and they could survive those. So I don't see why one couldn't survive an Alabama winter.
Well, because they can be kind of active as far as weather goes once or twice a year. Shock the daylights out of James Spann, our favorite meteorologist. So.
And then there's two bizarre incidences that happened in Gunnersville where they found dead sharks. And they
yes, because
think,
bull sharks can swim up.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
We've got to. I got to stop you.
They think though that these were hoaxes, that somebody had caught a shark in Florida and was passing through here and put it on the beach as a joke. But there's no solid evidence of that. It's problematic that one could get this far north, but maybe they are. I don't know.
They are.
And then there's another crazy story about an octopus being found in the Tennessee River, way up further north. So,
well, that's just crazy.
I don't know. These things really happen, though.
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
But we're going to go to break, and we'll be right back after this. Thanks, y'all, for being here, and we'll be right back.
Yep.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello. I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk radio.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
You are listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
The time is 23 minutes after the hour. Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio. I am Kat Hobson, your host, and I am so lucky I am hosting my friend Scott Mardis. He's also one of the people that has educated me the most about marine mammals, truly. And I have to say that one of the best artists that I know has joined us in chat. And if you go to Scott's Facebook page, you will see the beautiful work that Lawrence DeMesa does on the graphics that he does. And if you've seen the beautiful Paraversal Universe graphics that were used for Jennifer and Kevin's shows, he did every one of those too. He is just astounding. So thanks for being there, Larry. Now, Scott,
yeah, he helped me on a project I was working on too a while back. Back in the 70s, Roy Mackle, who was one of the main Loch Ness Monster researchers, had a bunch of art commissioned to represent hypothetical concepts of what the Loch Ness Monster might look like if it was a giant eel or a giant amphibian or various other hypothetical concepts, and a lot of that artwork was kind of just lost over the years, and I got Lawrence to help me digitally touch up the images that I could find, and we did a great job of restoring these images to color and put color on them and all kinds of cool stuff.
That is just so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So he helped me immeasurably on that. You could say he probably did 90% of the work on that. Some of it I had to take and get, like, partial images from 2 or 3 different sources and then stitch them together and then get him to digitally erase the seams and smooth it out. So by the time we got done with it, they looked great.
He said he worked his magic.
Yep, absolutely. I've got him working on some other projects right now, too.
Well, he does great stuff.
Absolutely.
So glad to see him out here.
Yeah.
But, you know, I am having such interesting thoughts about the stuff that we were talking about earlier with the alligators and the sharks. You had mentioned an octopus, and you know, to me, it's just amazing. I do know that the bull sharks do not have to have salt or brine. They are maneuvering through fresh water.
Absolutely. Are you familiar with the series of shark attacks in New Jersey in 1916 that were allegedly the inspiration for Jaws?
Yes.
All right. One of those attacks took place, I think it was like 10 miles from the sea up this creek called Matawan Creek in relatively fresh water. And though it was popular years ago to say that these attacks were done by a great white, the fact that this one took place in his creek has made a lot of people say, no, it more likely would have been a bull shark that done it.
Well, bull sharks are so aggressive.
Yeah, well, there was one swim all the way to Illinois up the Mississippi to a place called Alton, Illinois, and that's way up the Mississippi River. I don't know, like 1,000 miles, something like that. So
easily.
Yeah. So there's been speculation that, you know, one could even swim up to the Great Lakes, you know. So I don't know. It's unlikely, but it's not impossible.
Well, I think
and they're very aggressive.
Yes.
I think they can get maybe 12 feet long max. That's big enough.
I have not seen one that big. I've seen big ones because you live down there. Everywhere that you go that has a pier has sharks off the pier. That's why there are purple flags all the time. And Sherry in chat said Shark Week started today. I did not realize that.
Well, I'll go swimming in Lake Champlain, but I will not go swimming in freshwater or saltwater here because I don't want to get attacked by either a shark or an alligator.
Nope, not interested.
Yep.
I have actually been in an alligator nest without realizing that I was.
Yeah.
And that was terrifying the minute that enlightenment hit.
Yeah, well,
I was gone.
When I was a kid, I used to regularly go swimming in the Coosa River.
Yeah.
My grandparents had a house right on the river with a pier and everything, so I regularly used to go swimming there. And I didn't think about being in the water with cottonmouths and copperheads and snapping turtles and all that stuff. I didn't even think about it. I just went swimming. Neither did anybody else, but they were in there.
Well, I'm glad they didn't find you. But we have a question for you from chat.
Sure.
And Larry says, I have to ask you about the 1962 case of Edward Brian McCreary.
Oh, yeah. I actually just did a television interview about that case about a month and a half ago. Yeah. So I'm going to be on a program that is coming on Fox Nation sometime September or October. And I think it's called Hometown Monsters is the name of the show.
Yes.
And they go to various towns that are associated with famous monster cases and do segments about the town and the monster story. So they were doing Pensacola, which is where that happened. So essentially, actually, believe it or not, I'm actually friends with Brian McCleary's son. He's dead now, but I'm still friends with his son. And I tried to broker an interview with Brian McCleary, but unfortunately he died before I was able to put this together. But essentially what happened was, this would have been March of 1962, 5 teenagers from Fort Walton Beach drove to Pensacola with the intentions of diving on this shipwreck. What is the name of the ship? Hang on a minute here. It's a famous shipwreck that was turned into an artificial reef off the coast of Pensacola. Now, I've got a file here that's got all this information. Just give me a minute to find it.
Absolutely.
And I'll give you all the specifics. It's just hard to remember all this stuff off the top of your head sometimes.
Well, yeah. I mean, my file
All
cabinet up there is full. It purges stuff on its own now.
All right. What's the name of that ship?
Okay,
give me a second here.
Is it a monster? Like an Ichu monster?
Well, yeah, they were allegedly attacked by this plesiosaur-looking sea monster.
Is a plesiosaur?
That's what it looked like.
Wow.
Let me see here. Oh. What is the name of that boat? Hang on here.
Well, I am not much good on boats. The only
Massachusetts. The
Really?
USS Massachusetts. Yeah,
I
that's
did
the name
not
of the
know
boat.
that boat was there.
Yeah. So it's been sitting there since, 1921, I think. So it's been there 100 years, or close to it. So anyway, their intention was to take this Army surplus raft. They were all between the ages of 17 and 14. McCleary himself was 16. And they all got in this raft, and it's like, I don't know, a mile and a half off the coast. So they got in this raft and were headed out there with the intention of diving on the wreck. And a storm came up. And they supposedly got lost in the storm, and it was a fog. They made it to the ship and landed on the ship. And then they saw this pole-like object rise up out of the fog near where they were at. They said it looked like a telephone pole with an egg-shaped object on top, which is obviously the head.
Yeah.
And then they all panicked and were trying to swim back to shore from where they were at. Swim the whole way back, right?
I've heard this. Yes, go ahead.
So, yeah,
Now I know
so
what you're talking
anyway, they all panicked, and it was in the fog, and everybody was all confused, and they heard screaming like some of them were being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
McCleary described the creature as having a neck standing up about 12 feet out of the water, standing vertically up like a telephone pole with an egg-shaped head. oval eyes that were a greenish color. It had teeth he could see. And he saw like a roundish body. And he said he thought he saw something that resembled a dorsal fin as it went under the water, as it dived. Now, that could have been a dorsal fin. Plesiosaurs are not known to have had dorsal fins, but another possibility is that it could have been a flipper. As the body was going under the water, he saw the flipper at an angle and thought it was a dorsal fin. So I don't know. But anyway, to make a long story short, McClure was the only one that managed to swim all the way back to shore and made it to shore. And he passed out on the beach. They found him the next morning, and he told the rescue people what was going on. 3 of them they never found. A week later, one of the boys washed ashore dead. His body drowned, washed ashore dead. And he's buried, I think, in Panama City or Fort Walton. But I've actually got a photograph of his headstone. So the conventional newspaper stories at the time only talked about them getting lost and the other ones drowning. The sea monster part of the story didn't pop up till 3 years after the event, when McClure himself wrote an article for Fate magazine, for the magazine that your show's.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this was 1965, and in the article where McClure describes the sea monster, he said he told all this to the head of the rescue team that were looking for the bodies. I can't remember the guy's name, but anyway, the guy that he mentions in the article is mentioned in the 1962 newspaper articles. So he was a real guy, and McClure claimed in his Fate magazine article to have told all this about the sea monster to this guy, and the guy told him, to cover it up, So apparently, from all I've been able to gather from several different sources, McClure had post-traumatic stress disorder about this whole thing for the rest of his life, which is perfectly understandable. And he tried to, lead a quiet life and kind of stay hidden, but around the time the article came out in Fate magazine, he was contacted by Tim Dinsdale, who's a very famous Loch Ness researcher, that shot what is believed to be film of the Loch Ness Monster swimming in 1960. It's considered to be one of the best pieces of evidence for the Loch Ness Monster. So Tim Dinsdale contacted McClure, and McClure sent him a sketch of what the creature looked like. And this was reproduced in one of Tim Dinsdale's books, this book called The Leviathans, which I think came out in 1966, 67, somewhere in there.
Well, that was my
but
first
anyway,
experience with these creatures, that book.
Yeah. So there's a picture that McClure drew, a sketch of this plesiosaur-looking neck and head coming up out of the water next to a buoy.
Well,
so they were around a buoy next to the boat when part of this happened.
Had they tied up on the buoy? I mean, were they...
Part of the time, I think a couple of them tried to get up on the buoy and then they panicked again. So it's hard to remember off the top of my head, but it's all in the article. I can send you a copy of that article, by the way. Yeah.
Cool beans. I'd like to see it.
Yeah, but, the drowning and them going out there in the raft is all documented in newspaper accounts.
Right.
The only part that's controversial, for which, you only have McClure's testimony to go on, is the sea monster part of it.
Right.
But, one thing that lends credibility to the story is the fact that there are other reports of similar creatures in that panhandle stretch of Florida and other places from independent witnesses. You've got a dune lake at Destin called Lake Powell. There's a long history of reports of long-necked monsters in that Lake Powell. And there was a report, I think 3 years before the 1962 incident from Lake Powell, from 1958 and 59, of people seeing a long-necked creature like what McCleary described in this Lake Powell. You know, it's essentially just a little bay. It's salt water that anything from the sea could go over this dune and get into this little shallow dune lake, you know, very easily. So, you know, as close as what McCleary experienced was to shore, then the fact that you've got something that was just like it seen coming into this dune lake tends to suggest that if these things are real, they like to come in close to shore, you know. There was another incident in 1943, which is 19 years before the 1962 incident, that happened, a sighting off Panama City. And then there was a sighting from Pensacola again, I believe, in 1992, somewhere in there, by a preacher, saw it from a bridge in Pensacola. So
that's wild.
There is a long history of reports like that. So the fact that other people are independently reporting something like that in that whole little stretch of touristy area up in the Panhandle would tend to suggest that maybe he was telling the truth, you know?
Well, yeah. But, you know, I used to live in Destin pre-Opal.
Well, I used to go to Destin as a kid on vacation a lot, so I've been down there too.
But those little dune lakes, you walk down to, and you bluegill fish, and you just, because they're not very deep. And
but I mean, the main point is that if you can fish out of them, things are coming in from the sea and coming into them.
Right, exactly.
Is the main thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, you know. But people that question the authenticity of the story have hypothesized that it's possible that they were so panicked that McCleary might have had some kind of panic attack and hallucinated part of this, or maybe they saw a sea turtle, and over time the trauma of the events happening distorted what he really saw in his mind. I don't know, I wasn't there, but I think it's kind of oddball that the thing he's describing is so much like reports of these long-necked monsters from other places, including Lake Champlain.
I agree, but we've got to take
it resembles a plesiosaur, you know?
Yeah, but we have to take another break. But we'll be right back. And we have somebody in chat who says that she would like to know a little bit more about Champ because she is not familiar with his history. So we will be right back. Yep. We'll address that too. And thank y'all for being here.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, come on. I'm Southern, but... Nope. That'll do. Hello.
I am Kat Hobson, host of Paranormal Experience here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I enjoy having guests from all areas of the paranormal, from ghosts to ufology to cryptids and beyond. You'll find some of the best researchers in their fields bringing you some great information. Join me on Wednesday nights from 8 to 10 p. Eastern here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experienced Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. I am your host, Kat Hobson, joined with my wonderful guest, Scott Mardis, and we are having, frankly, a little freaky discussion because it's the water around where I swim. But I remember the experience that you're describing because I remember that they would hear their friends yell, and then there'd be nothing as they were trying to swim in. And
there was a lot of screaming, and people, the 3 of the 5 were never found. There's just nothing. The one boy washed ashore a week later, his body unmarked, drowned, dead, and he's buried in Panama City, I believe. Yeah, so I have a photograph of his grave, and I've got the newspaper notice of when McCleary died in 2016, and I have the original newspaper articles, digital copies of those, and I have his article from Fate magazine, and I also have the section from Dinsdale's book with the sketch in it. So I pretty much got all the information right here on the computer. Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about how cool it is to have that at hand when you're trying to discuss your work. It's just...
Yeah.
It is like having your own library, your own archive to have.
Well, I mean, I'm not a computer, but it's nice to have one. If, I remember the basic outlines of most stuff, but when you get down to little details, sometimes you have a brain fart and can't remember something, so it's nice to have it handy to look up,
I have mine and a lot of other people's too, so I seem to help with that. But can you go ahead? I know that we're going to, at the top of the hour, have a 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back, for full details and expansion on these topics for the second hour.
Yep.
But who is Champ?
Well, Champ is the name that has been given to the alleged unknown creatures that supposedly inhabit Lake Champlain in Vermont and New York State. Lake Champlain is a huge lake that is between the states of the western boundary of Vermont and the eastern boundary of New York State. The boundary of the state runs right through the middle of the lake.
Okay.
And the northernmost part of it, a small part of it, goes into Quebec province in Canada. So it's partially in Canada. This is a huge lake, 129 miles long, about 12 miles wide at its widest point. Its deepest part is 400 feet deep, which is about half the depth of Loch Ness.
Right.
But that's still very deep. It has an average depth, considering all the different depths in the lake, of 64 feet. But there's a large chunk of the lake. There's probably a 60-mile stretch where the water is regularly somewhere between 250 and 400 feet deep, which is very deep. So
yes.
Loch Ness is only 24 miles long, but is 750 feet deep. So Lake Champlain is 5 times longer than Loch Ness, but only half as deep in its deepest part. So you could say that that 60-mile stretch where it's over 250 feet deep is roughly analogous to Loch Ness in general outline.
Right, yes.
So the important thing about Lake Champlain is that it is a remnant portion of a marine embayment that existed around 10,000 years ago for about 2,500 years. And the significance of this is that when this was salt water, what is now Lake Champlain was a fjord of a much larger sea that was mostly up in Quebec and Ontario. And this inland sea, called the Champlain Sea, was larger than all of the Great Lakes combined. That's how big it was.
That's huge.
As big as Lake Champlain is now, you get out in the middle of it, and you think you're on the ocean. It was a mud hole in comparison to the previous sea that it was part of. And this sea was connected to what they call the Gulf of St. Lawrence, which is up around Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, where it comes out, that the general area of Canada. So they know for a fact from all the fossils they found up in Quebec and Ontario, and they found a few in New York State and a few in Vermont, that there were whales and seals and walrus and things like that living in this prehistoric sea that eventually became Lake Champlain. In 1849, in Charlotte, Vermont, railroad workers were digging up side of a bluff to make a bed for railroad tracks and found what they initially thought to be a horse skeleton. And then finally, somebody got the state geologist to come look at the skeleton. And he said, no, this is not a horse. This is a prehistoric beluga whale.
That's astounding.
So that was their first indication that there used to be a sea here. And they have found across on the other side of the lake in a place called Plattsburgh, New York, they found seal bones of a couple of different kinds of seals. But up in Quebec and Ontario, they have found like 20 beluga skeletons, and they've also found bones of bigger whales like bowhead whales, and like I said, they found walrus, and there probably would have been other things that they haven't found the bones of yet living in here and there, like Greenland sharks, possibly, large leatherback sea turtles, which are the largest living marine reptiles that we know about. They come up into cold waters.
Oh, really?
They can get about.
They got cold.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I didn't know that was a possibility, but.
Yeah. Well, anyway, these big leatherback turtles, which get like 10 feet long, they come up in the cold northern waters in the summertime to eat jellyfish. That's what they feed on. They eat these giant big jellyfish like the cold water. So they, in the summertime, they follow them up as far north as Newfoundland and Labrador, feeding on them. So it's entirely possible that there would have been leatherback turtles in the Champlain Sea 10,000 years ago when it was still marine. So anyway, how you get from that situation to the modern Lake Champlain is that there are fish, there are like maybe 3 or 4 different kind of fish that live in the lake now that genetic studies say are survivors from that prehistoric sea that managed to adapt to fresh water and are still living in the lake now. So in other words, you've got fish living in modern-day Lake Champlain whose ancestors adapted to living in fresh water, but their ancestors were living in the same sea with these prehistoric whales and seals and whatever else, you know? So it's entirely possible that if Champ is a real animal, that it is some kind of leftover that managed to hang on in the same way that these fish have. And it's probably feeding on them. And it's obviously had to make an adaptation from salt water to fresh water. And, you know, if you say that there could be prehistoric marine reptiles or prehistoric marine mammals that we know from the fossil record that have managed to survive out in the Atlantic Ocean, it's entirely possible that some of those could have come in when it was that prehistoric sea and got trapped. And this could include, you know, anything from things like mosasaurs and plesiosaurs from the Mesozoic era, which were marine reptiles, or possibly things that we know from later on, like this prehistoric whale called Basilosaurus, which also happens to be the state fossil of Alabama.
Yes, it is.
We're talking about... Oh, go ahead.
No, that's okay. You go first.
Well, we're talking about... This is not your typical whale. I mean, we're talking about an animal that got about 65 feet long, had this long body that looked like a giant eel, basically, with a crocodilian-looking head, but a set of normal whale flukes and a set of front paddles like you see on a dolphin or a whale. Mm-hmm. So the only thing that was really looked like a whale would have been the fins, the flippers, and the tail, and the rest of it would have looked completely alien for a whale. It would have looked something like I said, a giant eel with the head of a crocodile or an alligator. And this animal lived in Alabama when there was a prehistoric sea covering most of Alabama.
Yeah.
It was a place called the Mississippi Embayment, and it penetrated as far north as Arkansas, but it covered parts of Arkansas, covered all of Louisiana, which is where the first Basilosaurus was found, by the way, in 1834. But it covered most, if not all, of Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and probably parts of the Carolinas as well.
So
this thing lived about... Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, so, you know, this global warming thing and having water up to there is not a new experience for the Earth.
Well, the thing is, you got to understand about how plate tectonics works.
Right.
What that is that they know now that all the continental plates, the different continents,
yes,
are separate plates that float around on the sea of lava underneath called the asthenosphere. And sometimes the plates that can be lava up underneath the continental plates that raise it up higher than it normally would be. And then sometimes there are periods where it buckles and sinks down. So there's a whole history over millions of years of the continental plates not only moving around the surface of the Earth, but also rising and falling. So during the time that Basilosaurus would have been alive in this Mississippi embayment existed was probably a period of subsidence, to where the continental plates, the North American plate, was sitting down lower, and the seas were able to penetrate further inland than they would later on.
Right.
And at some point, probably around the time of the transition from what they call the Eocene period to the Oligocene, there was a major extinction event, marine extinction event, and probably partly what led to that is probably that there was a continental rise, and these shallow inland seas were drained off the continental shelf.
Mm-hmm.
And that probably would have had all kinds of ecological impact on species that normally lived in shallow water, were suddenly submerged in really deep water, and maybe they just couldn't adapt.
Yes.
And whatever fed on them died off as well because their food source disappeared, that they were adapted to eating, and they couldn't adapt fast enough and went extinct as a cause of that. So that sort of thing has happened plenty of times in the past. But
yes.
So anyway, getting back to Lake Champlain for a minute.
Hang on.
Oh, go ahead.
Because we're at the top of the hour. So we are going to go and do our news break. You know me, ever hopeful for a little good news. And we will be back.
Me too.
This is a good time to fill your beverage container and just kind of stretch out, walk around some, because this next hour is going to be rocking. We'll see you on the other side.
Live from NPR News, I'm Barbara Klein. As coronavirus cases in the U.S. surpass 5 million, according to Johns Hopkins University, President Trump's executive action extending weekly pandemic jobless benefits is being scrutinized. He announced it yesterday after his administration and Congress failed to make a deal. NPR's Tamara Keith reports Trump's move is substantially different from legislative action.
The president doesn't have the power to just extend the $600 a week enhanced benefit that expired at the end of last month. Also, he thinks $600 is too much. So with this memorandum, he's trying to shoehorn the payments in as disaster relief. He is directing FEMA to use funds set aside for hurricanes and other disaster relief. That would cover about $300 a week.
States also have to request the assistance, contribute to it, and administer the program, as many of them struggle from sagging revenues during the pandemic. French President Emmanuel Macron is hosting an online conference with global leaders today to organize emergency aid for Lebanon after Tuesday's devastating explosion in Beirut. The BBC's Tom Bateman reports at the same time, Lebanese are again in the streets protesting their government.
The sense of fury is everywhere in a country that was already deeply mired in crisis well before Tuesday's blast, as the recovery efforts continue and the number of dead continues to rise. Today's international online conference, hosted by the French President Emmanuel Macron, aims to raise billions of pounds in aid. But amid the deep distrust towards the country's government, he has said it must be channeled directly to charities and to the people.
The U.S. Agency for International Development says it's providing more than $15 million in aid through local partners there, not the Lebanese government. Social justice protesters took to the streets of Portland, Oregon again last night. Most were peaceful, but as NPR's Dave Mistich reports, police declared a riot after a fire was set inside a building.
Video on Twitter shows cardboard and pieces of wood being thrown onto a small fire inside of an office at the Portland Police Association. Police declared the protest a riot and then began moving hundreds away from the building. Dumpster fires were also set outside of the building, which is about 5 miles north of the federal courthouse that protesters had targeted for much of the summer. Saturday's crowds were reportedly smaller than the thousands who had turned out just weeks ago to protest the presence of federal agents sent by the Trump administration to protect the courthouse. Portland's protests against racial injustice and police brutality are now in a third month. Dave Mistich, NPR News.
This is NPR. In Nagasaki, Japan, commemorations of the U.S. atomic bombing there 75 years ago today. More than 70,000 people were killed in the attack just days before the end of World War II. NPR's Anthony Kuhn reports the ceremony was part remembrance, part cautionary.
After observing a minute of silence to honor the bombing's victims, Nagasaki Mayor Tomohisa Taue addressed a crowd reduced and spread out due to the coronavirus. He said that as nuclear powers build up their arsenals and scrap arms control deals, the threat of atomic bombs being used again is on the rise. He urged Japan's government to join a treaty banning nuclear weapons. But at a press conference, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe rejected the treaty as unrealistic. Also speaking at the ceremony was bombing survivor Shigemi Fukabori, now 89. "I'm determined to keep telling my story," he said, "so that Nagasaki will be the last place on Earth to suffer an atomic attack." Anthony Kuhn, NPR News, Seoul.
In Washington, D.C., police say a 17-year-old male has died and a police officer is struggling for her life at a local hospital after a mass shooting overnight. Police Chief Peter Newsham says the motive is unknown at this point.
There was some kind of dispute, and multiple weapons were produced, and multiple shots were fired, and as a result, we have 20 people that have been shot.
Hundreds had reportedly gathered for a cookout, music, and a block party. I'm Barbara Klein, NPR News.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Welcome back to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 5 minutes after the hour. Welcome back for the second hour of Fate Mag Radio here on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. I am Kat Hobson, your host, and I am so pleased to be part of the Fate magazine family. I'm really excited because we sell t-shirts now, and I'm getting one. So, if you haven't been to fatemag.com recently, good heavens, get there. We have like collectors groups, and we have magazines that are beautifully archived. Phyllis is putting together packages of some of the bigger, larger issues. I know y'all remember those, as well as some of the books that are available. We have all kinds of neat stuff, and it's all there, fatemag.com, and you can listen to the show there too. There's a chat. So I am excited to see all the neat things happening with Fate magazine. It's just a fantastic thing. You know, we've been in publication since 1948. I think that's really cool too. So as we get back to our show with my guest, Scott Mardis, I'm very excited because we were talking about, the continental seas were drained when the continental shelf shifted so that it was just taking everything back out. But we have a question from Sherry, who is so into this conversation, but she was not on Facebook this week because she was taking a break. And I understand that. She said she wasn't watching any news. It's been so relaxing. And my response to that was, sounds like heaven. But she is fascinated by the information that you're sharing, and she wants to know, what yourself and any teammates that you were working with have encountered, and the different types of research that you were doing, and, how often do you get out and do a champ hunt? I hate the word hunt. I don't like ghost hunt because I wouldn't want to be hunted, right?
Yeah.
But that is what it is.
Hunting ghosts is kind of a non-starter because how do you kill something that's already dead?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm doing video. I do video and audio ghost investigations. I investigate. I'm not out to hunt. But
and
that's what you do.
about Champ looking for something, whatever this is behind this phenomena, if it's a real animal and people are not making mistakes and hallucinating or whatever, it's got to be something that regularly spends most of its time in deep water. Or we would already know about it. We'd have confirmation. And we don't have that yet. So the only sensible place it's got to hide is in deep water. And it probably is some sort of ambush predator that hides down in the deep water, waits for its prey to come by, whatever that might be, fish, amphibians, small reptiles, maybe even, it may even feed on water birds. We don't know. But yeah, so the most sensible way to try to look for this creature is to penetrate into its world under the water with underwater cameras, hydrophones, things of that nature, you know, baited cameras. So I've been doing this for 27 years.
Where did I get 35?
Oh, I don't know. But I was living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Before I ever moved to Lake Champlain, I took my first trip up there in November of 1992 and spent 2 or 3 days. Then I finally moved up there in April of 1994 and stayed until December of 2011, almost 18 years. I was living there. So, and I still go back every summer. So, I usually go up there for a month or sometimes even 6 weeks and go out and do what I can, And I've worked with various collaborators over the years, including Liz von Muggenthaler, who you probably saw on the Monster Quest episode that recorded the echolocation like click sounds back in 2003.
Yes.
I worked with her later on.
Click sounds too.
Yeah. Well, the unusual thing about the click sounds, and by the time I was working with her in 2009, we were sitting on the shore recording live ones over her hydrophone equipment. So I was there and listened to them live as they were happening 6 years after the original recordings were made. So the interesting thing about those recordings is not so much the audible part that you hear, the clicking sounds, because certain fish can release gas from their swim bladders and make sounds like that. So the audible part that you can hear is not that special. What is special about those recordings is that there was a ultrasonic part of the signal that was above the range of human hearing that was recorded on the electronic sonogram part of the recording.
Oh my
yes,
gosh.
and the significance of that is that animals that make sounds of that high frequency beyond the range of human hearing, up in the range of 140 kilohertz, which is way past what a normal human being can hear. Most of those animal sounds that exist in nature are made by animals that use biosonar or echolocation. And what that is they're able to generate high-frequency sounds that can bounce off an object and come back and be analyzed by the animal's brain. They've got sophisticated hearing mechanisms to be able to process a sound that high. The information they get back from the returning signal helps them to navigate, locate objects in space, three-dimensionally, and also to pursue prey and even stun prey with these high-frequency sounds. So the significance is that the sounds that she recorded had such a high frequency on the audio sonogram, which is you can't hear on the tape, on the recording, but is registered on the electronic graph readout of the frequency range of the sound, is up in the range of whale and bat echolocation. So that's what was significant about it.
That is.
And that's what made her and a few other people think that, well, there's some animal in Lake Champlain that is using echolocation like a toothed whale, which may be significant. We haven't figured out a way to connect the sounds to the sightings of strange animals in the lake. But here is one significant thing. When they were recording the sounds in 2003, at the same time, an object appeared on sonar underneath the boat, about 15 feet long by their estimates. So they believed that whatever this object was on sonar was probably the same thing that was making the sounds. So the implication is that...
That's a little freaky.
Yeah, well, the significance of that is if you make the connection that, well, if this thing swam under the boat, it's about 15 feet long, and these sounds like an animal making echolocation, maybe the thing that showed up underneath the boat on the sonar was the animal making the sounds.
Well, that would be logical because it would be bouncing off of the boat.
So, yeah.
It would be navigating around the boat. Well, let me interrupt you for a second.
Way. Oh, yeah.
With a question.
Go ahead.
Sherry says, could it be dolphins that y'all heard, or is it not saltwater at all?
Well, there are freshwater cetaceans, but they live in South America and in India and in China. They're called freshwater river dolphins, and they're very prehistoric cetaceans that are survivals of types of whales that existed between 20 and 50 million years ago. So the idea is that it is possible that whatever the Lake Champlain creatures are, that they could be some kind of primitive whale, and some people have even speculated that may be a survival of this Basilosaurus whale that we were talking about.
Yes.
Now, from what they know about the skull and ear bones of Basilosaurus, they think that it could hear high-frequency hearing, but they don't think that it used echolocation, that it was that sophisticated enough at that point, had not evolved enough. But who's to say that if some kind of Basilosaurus descendant survived to the modern day and we don't know about it, it could very easily have developed echolocation abilities like other types of whales we know. So we just don't know. But
this is just so interesting.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about the Basilosaurus types of whales is, like I pointed out earlier, they had features that were very unlike what we normally consider to be what a whale would look like. It had a crocodilian-looking head. It didn't have a long neck, like is such a common feature of reports from Loch Ness and from Lake Champlain. But it did have the elongated body that theoretically could look like a long serpent in the water. So, there are a handful of reports from Lake Champlain and from areas around Lake Champlain, like the St. Lawrence River, that do seem to be describing something along the lines of Basilosaurus. So it is possible. The biggest downside to the Basilosaurus or whale idea is the fact that whales are air breathers, and would theoretically have to come up fairly often to get air, and would theoretically be seen more often. But I don't know. If they had some kind of underground air source, like from a cave that we didn't know about, or if they just barely broke the surface with their head, where the blowhole was, to just, for a second, and it was far enough away, you might not notice it. So I don't know,
That is...
That's speculation, but it's certainly not impossible.
Speculation. It's educated.
Yeah.
But we have to,
we're
take a
talking,
quick break.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
So, y'all don't go away, because my next question is going to probably freak him out. That's always fun with Scott. We'll be right back.
You're listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting, the best in paranormal talk, only on Paranormal Experience Radio, broadcasting live out of Birmingham, Alabama.
Several U.S. presidents are on record talking about the UFO mystery.
Yeah, Presidents Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan both had UFO sightings of their own, but the current presidential campaign might be the first in which UFO disclosure has been championed by a major party candidate.
DIA, CIA, it moves around, is operating a program to train psychic spies to spy and use their powers against Russia. John Ronson writes about this in The Men Who Stare at Goats.
The first known sighting of a ghost took place right after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in the late 1860s during the administration of Ulysses Grant.
Project Paperclip, Clinton releases it all in 1998.
Possibly the unequal cooling of its surface.
I say, do you still think it's a meteor, Professor?
I don't know what to think. The metal casing is definitely extraterrestrial.
It's a place where UFO hunters and scientists gather to examine paranormal activity in the region.
Some of the documents, this is bringing Nazi scientists into the United States to work here. So we fought against the Nazis, and it's not, this again is not a revelation. As early as 1947, 1946, we knew some of this, right?
On the paranormal, will we see U.S. President Barack Obama's foreign policy go intergalactic in a quest for gold stolen by aliens? We'll tell you at least how the White House responded to claims the chief executive has been teleporting to Mars. So let's get to today's Capitol account.
UFOs, hauntings, psychic abilities, conspiracy, ESP, cryptozoology. There are many things that remain unexplained in the inexplicable world around us, and we're talking about them here, looking for answers on WBHM Digital Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama. The truth is out there.
Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back to Fate Mag Radio. Thank you so much for being here. I am having a great time with my guest, Scott Mardis, who is just a brilliant researcher. His work is available online. He has so many articles published. He has done so many lectures. He is just really a fascinating person, and I'm so glad to be able to bring him here so that y'all can experience just the fun. And, you know, Scott, I always say that I love learning and you're a great teacher, but you are. You know,
well, thank you. I appreciate the compliment.
Well, you dot your I's and you cross your T's and you report things as they are, not as you want them to be. And that's something that I love. Rock solid. That's what you are.
Well, thank you.
Are you ready for a question, or were we going to continue?
Absolutely, that's fine, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, have there ever been any unexplained happenings related to the lake or any missing persons?
Absolutely, beyond doubt. There's a place in Burlington called Oakledge Park. Back in 2009, there was a Champ video. A video of something that is alleged to be Champ was shot there early in the morning in late May of 2009. And what you see in the video looks like the silhouette of a giant turtle, maybe 6 feet long or whatever. It swims along for a little bit, for about a minute, and then sinks under the water and it's gone. Mysterious piece of footage, never been solved, but it looks like a real animal. Some people have claimed that it was a hoax, but there's no evidence of that. So anyway, a couple of years back, maybe 3 years back, 2 years, I can't remember the specifics, there was a guy who was swimming there. People swim there all the time. In fact, I was swimming there last summer investigating the rocks around there, looking for caves that this thing might have gone into. So anyway, there was a guy who was swimming there. It's relatively shallow water, but he drowned. And it's like, you know, kind of mysterious. I mean, I don't know if the guy was messed up on drugs or if he was drunk or if he got caught by some freaky undertow or what, but this is a relatively shallow area, and the guy drowned, and I was, like, really surprised, and this happened while I was there, you know. There's another place, a bluff, at a place called Red Rocks Park. Now, for years, I used to go to the same bluff, which is 76 feet high, and sit up there with my video camera and binoculars and watch for Champ. Every few years, somebody will dive off that 76-foot bluff and drown. It's happened multiple times, and I was there in 2015 or 16, and a couple of days after I was up there on the bluff, some guy drowned, jumping off that bluff. And every few years there'll be somebody like in a kayak or a canoe will just mysteriously vanish. And sometimes they find the body and sometimes they don't. And as I was just telling you during the break, I remember a specific case. I don't remember the guy's name or exactly how many years ago it was. But there was a case of this guy, I believe it was in Colchester, Vermont, was in relatively shallow water, working underneath his boat, doing something, working on an engine or something, but he was underwater, and he just mysteriously died under his boat. I don't know if he had a heart attack or what, but something happened, and they found him dead underneath his boat in, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet of water, something like that. That was
unbelievable.
Yeah, so weird things like this happen, you know. And then, as I was telling you when we're talking on the break, the lake some years completely freezes over to the point where people can actually drive a car across the lake on the ice. And people
I would never
will
do that.
actually, yeah, they're stupid. I mean, there are people that literally will drive a big truck from New York State across to Vermont and back, and sometimes they drive across to a bar and get drunk and then drive back across to the ice. And every few years, somebody will hit a bad patch in the ice, and their vehicle will go down into that freezing water, and they'll either drown or die of hypothermia. So it's really not worth it, but people do that. And you know what ice fishing is, right?
I do. I also think that's crazy.
When there are places where the ice is really thick, people will drag these shanties, these little shacks that they built on skis of a sort, and drag them out onto the ice and chop a hole in the ice and ice fish through these holes in the ice. Very popular sport in Vermont and other places like the Great Lakes and Wisconsin and all those places. So, you know, sometimes those shacks, if you bring them out and the ice is too thin, the shack will fall through the ice. So there's all kinds of things that happen, you know. So, but people do end up missing. And one argument touching on this that the skeptics like to bring up is that, well, no air-breathing champ could survive under the ice when the lake's all frozen over. Well, they found out up in Quebec, up toward the Arctic in the extreme north of Quebec, there is a lake called Lac des Loups Marin, which translates, what that translates from the French is Lake of the Sea Dogs. And what they mean by a sea dog is a seal. This lake up in northern Quebec, almost to the Arctic, has a population of freshwater harbor seals that stay in the lake all the time. And the lake freezes over, and for a long time they said, you know, how these seals survive under the ice when they can't get any air. And they eventually found out that what happens is that as the ice is forming over the top of the water level goes down because it's being sucked up and frozen into the ice on top of it. And there is an air pocket between the ice at the surface and the slowly going down water underneath it. So there are air pockets between the ice covering the lake and the top of the water. So that's how they're getting air.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, so what this says is that even if the lake freezes over, an air-breathing creature in Lake Champlain could still get air.
Well, that certainly would nip that argument in the bud. Sounds like it did.
Well, now, if you want, I've brought up some specific cases about drownings in Lake Champlain that I can read, you know, the actual cases here.
Well,
unless you think we've gone over it enough, I don't know. It's up to you.
I think we're pretty clear on it. And we got a Pittsburgh girl question. You're not an Eagles fan or Philly Flyers fan, are you? If so, they might not be able to be your friend.
Well, I've never really been a sports guy anyway. You know,
That's
I
true.
lived in Philly. I mean, I've got nothing against the Flyers or any of those guys or the Eagles, you know. But I've just never been a sports guy, you know. And,
Well,
and
so
you
you
ought
can
to
be
know
her
as big as it is an Alabama and Auburn thing, you know.
I thought that was everywhere. That is
Yeah.
not everywhere. That is unique to Auburn, Alabama. When I moved to Georgia, I was expecting, you know, Georgia Tech, Georgia State, somebody to be, you know, a rivalry.
My
There's
sister,
nothing.
who's a school teacher in Rainbow City, is an Auburn nut.
Yes.
Yeah, so she's, you know, she's really into it. So.
Well, some of us are.
Yeah,
some
well,
of
it's
us
fine.
are just
you know.
killed by this stupid pandemic in our football season.
Yeah.
That's being incredibly selfish, and I do know that.
Mhm.
I'm being facetious just before anybody writes me to tell me how mean I am. But
Well, I wanted to go to Tampa to see King Crimson, and that got canceled too. So
yeah,
these things happen.
it does. And you know
Yeah.
what? We're so blessed. We really are so blessed. And there's so many people fighting every side of this pandemic. So I was not making light, but I do miss SEC football, just so you know.
I'll be back.
I know.
I'm sure.
Are you kidding? There's too much money. Of course they'll be back.
Yeah.
It's like the professional sports, you know. Yeah. Have sick people, but we're playing anyway. So,
I'll tell
but
you
I
one
digress.
thing, though. When I was growing up in the 1970s, I was into Georgia Championship Wrestling.
Yeah.
But wrestling and boxing are kind of basic. I mean, it's just two guys beating the crap out of each other. You know, there's no rules to remember.
Last man standing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was, back. I mean, I'm talking so long ago. Do you remember who Dusty Rhodes is?
I do, actually.
This is before Ric Flair. I remember when Ric Flair was just getting started,
Yeah.
But I did used to be into that at one point, so.
Well,
that's
I had friends that actually spent a large part of their life trying to get into that, and did okay. Did pretty well.
Yep.
So, I know that, I lived in Atlanta for a while. Of course, I know who Dusty Rhodes is.
Yeah. There you go. The American Dream. He was my favorite wrestler, beyond doubt.
It's because he was feisty.
Yeah.
Now, we've got about 8 minutes before we go to the break. Mm-hmm. And I am going to go to one of your papers. And you've done a lot of work on this. A lot of work. You're very, very knowledgeable about the possibilities of what could be, what could not be in the environments that we're talking about, because New York, upstate New York and Vermont, cold. I am just
in the winter.
Yeah.
I don't miss the winters at all. You just don't know. It's horrible. January and February in Bradenton, Vermont, just kill me. It's horrible.
The beauty is supposed to, offset that, but I will tell you that I have been in New York City. It was winter, and it was the coldest I've ever been as I was riding a carriage through Central Park under a huge blanket bundled to my eyelids and warmth. Nothing helped.
Yeah.
So there is nothing that
I've
colder
seen
than
it.
that kind of cold.
I remember one time, this probably would have been 1998 maybe, 99, somewhere in there. It got 40 below zero. I mean, it was so cold I couldn't get the dog to go outside to go to the bathroom. That's how cold it was. I had to physically carry him down the steps to get him to go pee.
Well,
and that's highly unusual, but it was that cold. I mean, it was so cold it hurt to breathe. That's how cold it was.
That's what it felt like to me when I was in.
So
but
speculations about a crocodilian animal in Lake Champlain are, in my opinion, ridiculous. But that was seriously proposed by someone a few years back, and I wrote an article about it, critiquing the whole idea in the Skeptical Inquirer newsletter, which is a highly skeptical forum for people that normally just, completely dump on cryptozoology,
Yes, they do.
The fact that they let me go in there and write an article should tell you something about, at least they have a little faith in my credibility,
Yes, they do.
Yeah, I'm friends with a lot of these people. I'm friends with a lot of these people that are just really complete anti-cryptozoology skeptics, but they're very savvy people, and I do listen to them. We don't agree on everything, but there is some bad cryptozoology out there, performed by people that don't know what they're talking about, and are not moving the case forward, but taking it backwards. And I'm sure you see this in all fields of the paranormal, including parapsychology and ghost hunting and all that.
Well, I am fortunate to have a platform that allows me to be aware of that, and I know when ideas are being put forth that are impossible. And I am educated by my guests, just like my listeners are. I have people like you and others that I know to be what I would consider the leading, experts, for lack of a better word. I know people hate that word being applied, but you have done your work. Yeah. You've earned your chops. You've been through it in various fields, and so I am very cautious when somebody is presenting a new idea, especially one that I'm not confident in. So I go out and I research.
Yeah,
and
I mean, if
there's
something to an idea, you should be able to find some kind of independent, corroborating opinion or evidence to back up the idea from some independent source.
Yes, and
that's what reliable information is built on, is corroboration.
It is.
An independent corroboration from other sources,
Yes, and, I find it interesting when I'm reading an article that says, that they're closely related to, that species family, confirmed by many eyewitness accounts compiled. Well, I didn't find any. So I wondered, in the course of your work, have you found people that said that, these creatures are obviously crocodiles?
Well, let me put this into some perspective for you. Okay, during the 80s, around the time after Sandra Manzi's photograph, the famous Champ photograph, came out, this really put Champ on the map and got people's attention. It actually, the Manzi photograph shifted people's attention from Loch Ness to Lake Champlain because it was such a spectacular photograph.
It was.
A lot of people consider it to be one of the best pieces of photographic evidence of the possibility of these animals existing that exist. Other people, have tried to tear it apart over the years and say that it was just a log that happened to look like an animal.
Right.
And if you don't believe that there is a strange animal in the lake, then that is a logical explanation. However, you go talk to, you can't talk to Sandra Manzi now. She's dead. She was a friend of mine. But if you had gone and talked to her and talked to her family who were there, they would tell you that, no, it was an animal that was looking around, and we watched it, and, So there's a lot of controversy about that. But anyway, talking about, there was a period in the 80s when Lake Champlain had a lot of attention from cryptozoologists and interested scientists that had an open mind about the possible existence of Champ. There was a lot of attention on the lake. And among the people that were discussing the possibilities, two of the most popular ideas about what Champ could be were probably the most popular, and this is the same for the Loch Ness Monster, is the idea that it was a surviving colony of long-necked plesiosaurs, which were fish-eating marine reptiles with long necks from the age of the dinosaurs. Mm-hmm. They have a fossil record spanning about 140 million years, roughly contemporaneous with the entire history of dinosaurs. So they were highly successful animals. They were found all over the world. Some of them had short necks with big heads, which are the type of plesiosaurs that Max Hawthorne has in his books called pliosaurs. And then there were the other extreme that had extremely long necks, whose necks were that were 2 times longer than their bodies, called elasmosaurs. And in between those two extremes, there was a whole range of grades of types with slightly bigger heads and shorter necks, going all the way from one extreme to the other, but they're all called plesiosaurs. But relative to Champ and the Loch Ness Monsters, the ones that are of interest are the ones that had the long snake-like necks and snake-like heads. So that was a very popular explanation for what Champ and the Loch Ness Monster might be. Right. And it remains so till this day. The other idea that was very popular back in the 80s was this Basilosaurus idea, which we've already discussed, you know. So that was pretty much the situation up until the early 1990s when Dennis Hall started being prominent with his organization called ChampQuest. Now, Dennis Hall introduced the idea that he thought that the champ animals had legs with feet rather than flippers. And his animal that he thought was the best match for this was a prehistoric, semi-aquatic reptile. There's still debate about its habits, called Tanystropheus longobardicus. And this animal is supposed to have been extinct for roughly 230 million years. Has a complete, the group that it belongs to, the Tanystrophiidae, have a complete fossil record spanning 46 million years, but the genus Tanystropheus itself only has a fossil record spanning 17 million years in the early part of the Mesozoic era. So it has a very brief window in which it was a highly successful animal. Now, this animal and all of its relatives are generally assumed to have gone extinct before the major dinosaurs even appeared on the scene. You know, so we're talking about an animal that's supposed to have died out a third of the way through the entire Mesozoic era. You know, so it was not a highly successful animal as compared to the plesiosaurs and the dinosaurs and the flying reptiles. I mean, all these animals have fossil records spanning hundreds of millions of years as to opposed to 50 million years. You know, so there's a big difference here. So anyway, this animal, Tanystropheus, looked like a long-necked plesiosaur, but instead of having flippers, it had legs with webbed feet, so it looked like a plesiosaur with frog legs, if you can imagine that. So it's such an oddball animal that the paleontologists have been trying to figure out whether it was primarily lived on land, or if it was semi-aquatic, or if it lived all of its time in the water. They flip-flop back and forth. In fact, a couple of days ago, a new paper just came out saying they've gone back to thinking that they lived most of their time in the water and maybe only came ashore to lay eggs. But anyway, this animal had a giraffe-like neck, and it was made up of these really unusual long neck vertebrae. It only had 13 neck vertebrae, but they were extremely long, and they looked almost like a chicken thigh bone. If you can imagine an animal with a super long neck that took up two-thirds of the length of its body, and the whole neck was made up of 13 long chicken bones with these stiffening ribs running down. He apparently had an extremely stiff neck. But this thing was extremely awkward looking. It looked like a giant frog with a fishing pole for a neck and a snake's head.
That's a little freaky.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's so oddball looking. This thing, the way it was built, was obviously highly specialized for whatever way it was living. And it's so oddball that you can't really see it being easily at home on land or easily at home in the water. It's not built for fast swimming. Really, what it's built for, and this is what they say in the papers, they think it would sit on the bottom in relatively shallow water and try to hide and ambush its prey, fish most likely, with that long neck and snake-like head, and it had fish-eating teeth. So this thing was about 16, 20 feet long, somewhere in that range. It wasn't that big, but the thing is, there's so much against the idea. The fact that it has a very short fossil record. It's only found in isolated places around the planet. It's not like it had a cosmopolitan distribution, was found everywhere, like the plesiosaurs have literally been found from the Arctic to the Antarctic, and any continent or country you can think of, they've just about been found in.
Yes.
All over the world, and like I said, over a time span of 140 million years. So the fact that this thing has such a short fossil record, and it's obviously not a very fast swimmer, it's just hard to see this thing as awkward looking as it was. And for a long time, and some paleontologists probably still think this, it was thought that this animal lived on the shore and used its long neck to hunt from shore, to stick its long neck and head down in the water to eat fish from the shoreline.
Interesting.
Now, if that was the lifestyle of this animal, where's he going to hide in Lake Champlain? If it's walking around on the beach, I mean, what's he going to do? Hide behind a tree?
Well.
So seriously, anyway, basically, to make a long story short, Dennis Hall was suggesting that this animal spent most of its time in shallow water, would come into the swamps along the shores of Lake Champlain and hibernate in the swamps around these rivers. Now, the obvious problem with that is that the people that inspect the water quality for the state of Vermont, that's where they go to get their water samples, is back in these swamps. Now, I don't know, I just get a hard time accepting this idea that, yeah, there are dinosaurs hiding back in the swamps along the shores of Lake Champlain, and we can't find them.
Right.
I mean, I've seen something in the lake that I think was probably one of these animals. But me telling you that I saw this is not going to prove to a scientist that, yeah, it's real. No, you've got to find a body or a piece of a dead body or a skin sample or something in order to make it real to them, right?
It requires
so
evidence.
I'm telling you,
follow the evidence.
I'm telling you that I saw something with my own eyes, and I've spoke to many people that I consider to be reputable people that have also claimed to have seen something in the lake. So what I'm telling you is that I believe there are creatures in the lake that have been there for hundreds of years, probably thousands of years, that people see that we don't know about yet, that they call champ. You know, as a colloquial name for it, but that there are creatures. I believe this, but I could understand why somebody that hasn't seen anything would not believe in it. I mean, but the point I'm getting at here is that in order for this creature to be real and for there to be a breeding population of these animals, it's a big lake, but in order for there to be a population of these animals that we don't know about, that are really there, the only logical place they've got to hide, to live and die, and we don't find them, is in the deep water.
Yes.
And an animal that big would most likely have its origin in the sea. It would probably have, at least if it's coming and going from the sea, or it's been trapped in the lake for 10,000 years, and previously its ancestors lived in the sea, even if it was a Tanistropheus, if it was descended from that, if it had been out in the ocean for millions of years, it would probably have flippers at this point.
Right.
Yeah. So
evolution happens.
Yeah. So basically, the situation is all of the reports of champs with legs with feet seem to emanate from Dennis Hall himself. If you go back and you look at the sightings record, there are maybe 4 or 5 incidences where people describe flippers or fins of some sort. So it's extremely rare. Usually people don't see the appendages of these creatures. But there are a handful of reports of people describing flippers. Now that doesn't rule out these creatures being amphibious, because you have like maybe 5 or 6 reports of champs being seen crawling around on the beach or close to the beach.
Sea turtles come in at my beach and lay there.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And they have flippers. Yep.
Yeah, well, flippers.
They have flippers. Yeah.
The first time I saw that, I didn't know that's what it was.
Way.
But
yeah, and plesiosaurs were built that way too. I mean, there's a lot of speculation about whether they had the ability to move around on land or not. Some people don't think they could because of the way their pelvis was weakly connected to their backbone, but it's not for sure. And even if the ones from 65 million years ago couldn't move around on land, that's not to say that their ancestors couldn't have evolved that ability in 65 million years, so we just don't know. You know?
Well, I have one last question in chat because we've only got about 3.5 minutes. But do you mind if I interrupt you for it?
Go ahead, yeah.
Well, since I already interrupted you, I'm sorry. Could there be a connection of all water sources very deep that they could possibly use to travel? Back and forth to other large bodies?
The thing that seems to rule that out is you would seem to notice the tides would be noticeable going up and down, and there would probably be noticeable salt in the water if it was an underground marine connection we didn't know about. But I don't know, it's not impossible, but there's no solid evidence of it. So
I had seen that theory posited on Loch Ness.
Yeah. So basically, what I was trying to get at with this Tanistropheus thing is that this crocodile, long neck crocodile idea is basically the Tanistropheus theory through a new door, and basically has the same problems. And if you look in my article, it's all there.
It is. I talk about cited it very well.
Animals. So if anybody wants to follow this up, just do a Google search, Champlain croc mythic proportions, and it'll take you right to the article. So you'll see what I'm talking about.
And it is cited very well, but all of your work is. So.
Well, thank you.
Well, I had nothing to do with it. That's you. But if you want to, do you want to go ahead and tell people how they can find you to get in touch with you if they have questions? Or
Sure. Well, probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is there's a Facebook group called the Zombie Plesiosaur Society.
Yep.
And that's how to get a hold of me, the best way. So. And I've got a book too.
Yes, I was going to say
Night of the Living Dead Plesiosaurs.
Yes.
Night of the Living Dead Plesiosaurs on Amazon. It's a Kindle only, but it's there.
And it's good.
Thank you.
It is. Well, you're welcome.
Yep.
But I've had that book on my Kindle for years, and I always go back to it.
Well, thanks.
I'm a junkie. But
yeah.
I do.
Well, we got to talk about a lot of cool stuff. I mean,
we did.
The time always gets away from you every time.
Well,
know?
that just means we're having a good show, and you've got compliments all over here in chat.
Well, thank you.
So, and
anytime you want me to come back, I'm here. So.
Well, you know I can't stay
Don't
away from this
hesitate.
topic too much. But Max has that book. I need to get him back on. So I love this stuff. It's not my strongest field. You know, with all the research that I do, it is not my number one go-to field.
Well,
I'm not
all
an
the
expert.
speculation aside, a lot of what I'm talking about is fact. I mean, these prehistoric animals, whether they exist now or not, really did exist at one point.
Yes.
So we're talking about real things. Whether they're around now or not is debatable,
Well, and that's what we're trying to find out with your work, right? Trying to find out what these things are. For sure.
Yep. That's what I'm trying to do. Yep.
And you're doing a good job.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I just love when we get to talk. We don't do it often enough.
Yep.
But, well, I am going to let everyone know that we are going to be taking the rest of the evening, and I'm going to be doing more research and studies. I don't know about you, but I love this stuff. And for everyone listening and everyone in the chat rooms, thank you so much. I have had a great time. I have hopefully brought you some new ideas here with the different kinds of possibilities. When you think about a lake monster, right? You don't necessarily think that there's going to be just a whole lot of things to choose from to be a possibility for what what you're researching. And
well, some people point to the fact that you can use multiple candidates that are so different from each other to say, well, see, people aren't seeing all the same thing, and the descriptions don't add up. So I don't know, it cuts both ways. So
well, and that matters because it's a big deal. And speaking of interesting things to try and research and learn from, and I am going to be joined this week, Paranormal Experience with Kat Hobson, by a gentleman named Alfonso Calasuano, and he is the co-author of the Book of the Magical Mythical Unicorn. And I have never talked to anyone about unicorns. I have a friend who is one. So
there was a prehistoric giraffe relative that had a single horn called Sivaderium. So you might want to look into that ahead of that show.
Siva?
Sivatherium.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it was if you're looking for a prehistoric animal that would make a decent real unicorn, that's one of the best candidates out there.
Well, now you know I'm not what I'm going to be doing for the next couple of hours. But anyway, do join me there on Paranormal Experience. That's Wednesday night from 8 to 10 Eastern. And Denise Pridemore is having a bit of a time. We are going to be praying for her good health. I'm so excited that she is getting this stuff taken care of. So it's not life-threatening. It is keeping her busy. And she has doctor's appointments on Monday. So she will not be here, but we will be playing her interview with Rick Rose from 2018. And it's a good one. Anything with Rick Rose is good. So then we will have Full Spectrum Project back on Thursday from 8 to 10. And then Shelley will be back with a new show. I love it. She alternates weeks, and every week she's live. I just get excited because it's like a new present. But Ghost Talk Radio is going to be back live on Friday. And then next week on Fate, I have Robert Lindsay Milne with me. So it's going to be a big week here at WBHM. Y'all come back, enjoy yourselves, and you know what?
You just get out there and you just be that change you want to see, because we can do it. We can. Everybody is so tense and upset and quick to take offense, quick to be, hurt. And it's devastating. It truly is. But we can manifest the world that we want to see. You can do it just by saying, hi. Or, isn't this a lovely day? 200 degrees isn't really that hot outside, right? So, I get it. But you can be the person that you would want to have as a friend, or a spouse, or a parent. Just be the best you, and you will be the difference in a lot of people's worlds. Thank you so much for being here. See you same cat time, same cat channel. Good night.